to learn about how to market for your course. First up, we do have Caitlin Becker. She's from Van Andel Institute, and she's the Genomics Core Lab Manager there, talking about our sponsor for this event, New England Biolabs. So we go.
Thanks. So spoiler, I'm not from New England Biolabs. But thank you to them for letting me steal their, bit for their chance to kind of sell you on things. I don't even know where their booth is, but they are fantastic. So visit their booth. Anyway, I'm here to talk about how we collaborated with NEB to bring the classroom into the core. And I'm going to start with this kind of basics. So who are we? Who's Van Andel? What our goal was? Why did we want to bring the classroom into the core? What our plan was, and then a little bit of self-evaluation. What would we do different? How did it go? So the Van Andel Institute, we have quite a big group here, so you hopefully have seen someone around from us. But we're a nonprofit research institute, but we also have an education institute and a graduate school. So there is a lot of educational components that are just built into our institute that make that portion really important to us. And we actually have, our core directors will teach courses at the graduate school. So we are very well integrated into our grad program. So the goal here, a couple different things, was number one, to build relationships. Most of us work in cores. You know how it goes, where if the grad student doesn't know you, they're not going to come and find you and ask you questions. If they don't come and find you and ask questions, they're probably going to design an experiment that you might or might not agree with. And then things can spiral from there. So we really wanted to establish kind of that face-to-face interaction where they learn my name, we get to chat about things, they get to be comfortable with me, and hopefully when they go into their lab and it's time for them to start an experiment or design their experiment, if they've got a question, they don't hesitate to reach out to us so that we can be a part of that process from the beginning. We also felt that it was important to almost create a common language. So providing training understanding of just what we do. A lot of times our grad students will learn to submit their samples through our portal, and then they either get the data back, or even scarier, they get graphs back from the bioinformatics core, and they have no idea what happened in the middle there. It's like magic. It just appears, and then they, move on with their lives. We felt it was really important to kind of provide understanding and a general framework for what we do, so that way they can ask the right questions and they can hopefully eventually design better experiments. And I've got this little joke on here, but it is true. Labs are not created equal. What we may consider good technique, another lab may not. And so when doing a library prep in the labs, we really wanted to provide the grad students with the tools that they need so that way they can do it well and they can do it properly. And then last is an introduction to alternative career paths. So grad students, obviously, they know the path of academia to become a PI, but there are so many other places for them to go with that, and it's important for the course to be a part of that conversation, as well as for-profit companies, so NEB in this case. A little bit about the resources that we have at the Institute. We have a pre and post PCR space with 4 benches in each spot, 2 thermocyclers in pre and post. We had 4 instructors for this class for the actual training. We had 3 core members, our core director Marie, myself, and another core member, and then our NEB rep flew in to help us train as well. And we had 18 grad students. We felt like it was the best way was to prep all the DNA beforehand. It was kind of one last thing, and aliquot it out so that each student could have a library prep, so they could do a full library prep themselves. And then we did the sequencing on the back end. So we understand that graduate students are very busy, and this is outside of their classroom time. So we wanted to be very respectful of that, as well as we're bringing graduate students into our lab. So we want to minimize the, disruption to our core facility as well, and then, do a massive deep clean after they leave. And so we kind of split up into 4 blocks. We did a Wednesday early morning, afternoon, and then Thursday morning time. And this is where the NEB Next Ultra Express DNA library prep workflow was like key, because you can do it in about just under 2 hours. And that's quite honestly for a good technician. That's like if you're flying through it. And that was something that we kind of discovered. But our plan was, if all things were perfect, to do an hour of teaching time and then our library prep, 2 hours, library QC. In reality, we found pretty quickly that we had to nix that library QC. The first session that we only had 4 students, and they did pretty well, but they ask a lot of questions, which is fantastic. They want to learn, it's wonderful. And also, we did not want to rush that library prep time. I wanted to be able to talk about how to treat an enzyme and how to properly mix your master mix and how to clean the lab benches and your pipettes. I wanted to go through all of that, and that takes time. So we ended up nixing the library QC, and then it worked great. For our second 2 cohorts, we had more than 4 individuals, so we had to kind of do like a rolling, one group would start in the lab while the other is doing the teaching portion, and then we would kind of rotate them out because we only have 4 benches and we didn't want them to share. But it worked fine. They were pretty flexible. So some of the things that we released to the lab were their quants, bioanalyzer traces, and then we've got like multi-QC reports and fast QC files. And it's important that this is what we gave them, because this is what we would give someone. If they did a project through us, they're gonna get those traces. We wanna talk about what does a good library look like? What should it look like? What kind of, when you get a fast QC, what do you do with it? What's in that multi-QC report? What is a Q30? How your mapping percentages, what does all of that mean? So it was important that we give them the things that we typically would give them and then walk them through it. And we did find, in general, that the students really enjoyed it. So we got really, really positive feedback, and this is one of our grad students actually in the lab doing, her library prep, and it was a lot of fun getting to know them. So I think it was very, very valuable. One thing we'll probably do in the future would be to try and collaborate with an informatics course to take it to the next step, so that way they know what to do with their data a little bit better. But in general, I think it was a really, really positive experience, and NEB was like critical for that. So they provided the library prep kit to us, and they flew in Jeannie and James, and they came in and they helped, and they even brought magnets because we didn't have enough magnets. So quite honestly, like that part worked really well, and we covered the sequencing costs. So yeah, thanks everyone. It was fun. We had a blast.
Hey everyone, hi, my name is Lauren Ciotti. I am a senior science writer at Johns Hopkins University and the Johns Hopkins Convergence Institute. I got my start a little differently. I was talking to Caitlin before this. Actually, my first job graduating from undergrad was in politics, and I hated it. It was awful. So then I was trying to look for somewhere else that I could make a difference, that would be a change, and I was getting married, so I wanted to move to Baltimore, and I stumbled upon a group called the Computational Genomics, Center for Computational Genomics, run by Sarah Whelan, who is now at NHGRI. And it was exciting because I got to organize events, which I had been doing on the politics side for the Senate of Pennsylvania, but now I could do it for scientists. And I will say that academia, we can complain about politics all you want, but man, this is easy peasy compared to what I had to do. So now I'm a science writer instead of working for the experiment. I do still work for a core. I merged from working for the workshops, which I still do, to working with the core, and now I do the workshops for Convergence Institute along with writing our grants and doing all of our communications. So press releases, website content. I wear all the hats, master of all things, and it's actually a lot of fun. But I do realize that my story is rare, and not everyone has me, and not everyone is able to have a resource. So thankfully, I'm here, and I can teach you a little bit about how to do this on your own. And I hope it's fun, and it's really exciting to see so many of you here. So I hope this is valuable. The number one thing when we think about marketing, at least from my perspective, is that we have to build and maintain your brand. I know it's kind of confusing as a core because are we a business? Are we not a business? Do we have a brand? What is a brand? Why do I need a brand? Everyone knows what a microscopy core is. Everybody knows what a genomics core is. But it's actually kind of really important for a number of reasons. One is so that you have, I'm kind of going to roll off my bullet points a bit. When you create a visual identity that's part of your brand, so we're thinking kind of making a brand package. Part of that brand package is a clear mission statement, which is important for people to know. Are you going to be educating researchers and students on how to do this? Is education going to be an arm of your mission, or are you just service? We'll find that oftentimes education is a helpful marketing tool and a helpful way to get word out about your mission, about your service. The clear visual identity for your website and emails is actually super important for recognition. If you're going to have a new service, if you're going to have a seminar talking about something that really went well in your core and you want to talk about this project, having a visual identity, having a clear logo is going to be really great for anyone who's walking around and goes, oh, that's ECGC, which is that is my core's logo. And that stands for Experimental and Computational Genomics Core. That's a huge mouthful. I have no idea why, but my PI really wanted the word experimental genomics somewhere in there. They wanted that phrase. So we had to kind of find a way to break it down, make it recognizable, have a logo that makes sense. So if you use any type of imaging, have it make sense. Everyone knows it's kind of a circus plot, hopefully. That's going to make sense for genomics. You have keywords on there that tell you what we do. The next part of creating and building your brand is to identify your target audience and the best ways to communicate with them. This is not a natural thing for a lot of people. One aspect of marketing that we say is not very good is what we call spray and pray, where we just spray everything everywhere and we pray to God that someone and everyone who needs to see it sees it. Out of the 100 people, at least we got 5. But that's not really a good way to spend your time or your money or anything. We think of billboards. Billboards can be targeted, but if you're trying to target a niche group, I'm not going to get a billboard in Baltimore on 83. That's going to not be a good way to spend my money. I won't be allowed to because we have a core grant, so I'll get in big trouble. 3, how many people on 83 in Baltimore on the highway are going to think, yes, genomic sequencing and analysis, absolutely what I need? They're not going to. So we have your brand, you have your identity, and now it's time to tell your story. So you have something that you want to tell people about. Moving on through this presentation, we're going to talk about 3 messaging channels. Websites, flyers is going to be one that we're going to do a little demonstration on. I don't have my laptop up here for the nature of the talk, so it's going to be a little difficult to do a real step-by-step guide, but we're going to break it down so you can kind of see how you will be able to apply this and do it on your own. And the other one is email listservs. So whenever you have something to say you have to send an email out to your users. A lot of times one core at our university would have some type of temporary 10% discount for a new service that was being offered by Illumina or PacBio or someone. They were able to do a temporary discount. As a Cancer Center core, I was never actually able to offer that. However, a lot of other cores are able to. So you have a story that you want to get out, or you're going to have a seminar. You're kind of going to take it all the way back to elementary school and think, how do I write a story? What are the 5 W's? The who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the how. And then at the end of that, you're going to have your call to action. So the who is your target audience. What is obviously your topic or event. When is your date or time. Where is your location and your directions. Why is the purpose or goal of your event, or what is the purpose of this flyer? What am I giving you for? What is this for? How is your messaging channels? How are you going to get this information out? Is it going to be multi? Is it going to be on your website? Are you going to use social media? That is something that we have to think about. Are we going to send emails, or do we have our iLab? Do we have our email listserv? Are we going to set up flyers? What messaging channels throughout our universities can we utilize to get our word out? And then your call to action is, what do you actually want your audience to do when they see this piece of paper, when they see this email, when they see this website or this social media post? Where do we want them to go? What do we want them to do? And that needs to inform all of your other parts and aspects of your story. All of these have to be focused on equally together. Now, talking a little bit about target audience, we have to think about, who are you trying to reach? For us, it's usually graduate students, at least in our genomics core, graduate students, postdocs, departments. Some of you have industry. I don't necessarily have industry, not in the way that we would do marketing, but some of you might. And then when you think about your target audience, so okay, I know this demographic, I know this group of people, how do we reach them? So we have the email listservs, your website, social media, iLab page. When I started working at Hopkins, I had to try to figure out, okay, if I'm a grad student, where do I go to get information? How do I do this? Who do I talk to? What do I do? And that involved me actually talking to grad students. I wasn't one. I was coming from working in politics. I had no idea what the landscape was at Hopkins. I had no idea where people got the information. So I talked to my PI, I talked to our rotating students in the lab, I talked to almost everyone I could find and be like, where do you get info? Shockingly, it was flyers. So I learned, okay, I have to put flyers up. People actually look at those things. Me, coming from, communicating for a politician, it was knock on the door, drop a door hanger, which was horrifying, and I don't know why we did that. And then, your newsletters and things like that. So I had to kind of adapt, get my information, and figure out, what am I doing? What are the products that I'm going to give, and how am I going to give it? Your website is another way to reach your audience. Oftentimes, I will always say, and I always push in my own marketing campaigns, is that everything is going to lead to the website. If I have information and my call to action, I'm going to lead you to my website where you can get more. That's going to be my call to action, or something on my website will be a call to action. Registering for or participating in a seminar, I'm going to lead you there. I'm going to specifically tell you what to do and how to do it. And if you have to think for more than half a second about how to do the thing I want you to do, there's a problem. Social media. How many people here have a social media for themselves or for the core? That's good. That's actually really surprising. That's good. Now, one thing that is important to think about is actually using it. I'll give you an example. My core we have a seminar that we were co-sponsors of that kind of morphed. There's a lot of changes going on in the Cancer Center at Hopkins, so the demographics have kind of changed, our organization has changed. So, but when we were back for Center for Computational Genomics, our symposium was co-sponsored by our core. I was both, so I was wearing two hats at the time. And I had someone live tweeting our event. I had a Twitter handle, but they did not have, they were not tweeting it from my Twitter handle. They were not tweeting it with any type of hashtag. And as a result, I missed out on this huge opportunity to get word out and recognition for my core. Leo was great, the postdoc who was live tweeting. The talks were wonderful and enthusiastic, but I lost a huge opportunity there. So trying to use those channels to our advantage as well is something else we have to think about. Your iLab page is another form of messaging. It is another way to communicate with your group. That is something that I think a lot of people just kind of plaster information on, but it's so hard to read. If you go on that iLab page, you literally have one page to tell people important information. That's almost impossible. You have to get your pricing somewhere on there. You have to do a lot of things. So what I did for our iLab page is I did a brief introduction of our services, and then everything's a link to our website where you can get our full pricing, where you can learn about all our nitty-gritty services. Because, a sequencing core, not only are we doing sequencing, we're doing a library prep, sequencing, analysis, and downstream bioinformatics. Page is crazy. So we're kind of 3 cores in one, including microarrays. So that can be very overwhelming, and we have to try to distill the information in a way that is digestible and that's easy to navigate and find. This is something I kind of talked about earlier, is building your online presence. This would kind of be maintaining your website and your social medias, anything, and your iLab page. And it's important to have those visual identifiers for your core available on all of those things. So if you have a logo, which everybody should, there are a lot of ways to do it, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But you can get a logo. Hopkins has the Art for Science department, and they do have a service center there where you can go and you can get them to develop a logo for you. They can make a banner for your website. They can make letterhead. They can do a lot of things. But while you're doing that and while you're building your presence, you have to stay in compliance with university branding regulations. Technically, I am not allowed to call my logo a logo. It is a design workup. One other thing I'm most definitely not allowed to have is Johns Hopkins anywhere near my logo. There's actually something for our Convergence Institute as well. It'll say Convergence Institute. Our official name is the Johns Hopkins Convergence Institute. But my director of PR at the Cancer Center absolutely did not want the dome anywhere on there. The Hopkins dome is a very notable visual representation of Hopkins. I could not have that. I can't have Johns Hopkins there. I can have it on my website, but it has to be a standalone Sidney Kimmel or School of Medicine logo. There's lots of reasons for that. We can say it's dumb. I think it is. But that's also their way of maintaining their own brand and ensuring that we follow those guidelines. So that is something I cannot stress enough. There are also ways to stay in compliance and show that your branding and who you are as an institution or a group or a core is relevant to your home institution. And you can do that through color schemes. You can go and look on Hopkins has a really wonderful branding website where you can see the color schemes and the fonts. They tell you where to get those color schemes and fonts, and then if you only have Adobe, you can get those on Adobe. They'll tell you the hex colors. They'll tell you pretty much anything that you need to duplicate it and have that same font, and the same marketing and branding. And then another thing for your website is choose a domain names that are easy to remember. For the Center for Computational Genomics, we were genomics.jhu.edu. For Convergence, it's convergence.jh.edu. For ECGC, it was ecgc.jhu.edu. All of these are pretty easy to remember. I remember, I think we had our flow core or microarray core, I think it was flow. It had the longest name. There's no way you could remember it. There was numbers in there. And I'm thinking like, why did you do that? He had no clue. It was great. The website was extremely dense, but I could never remember the name. So if anybody came to me as an admin in a core and asked me, okay, so what about this other Cancer Center core? I could never remember where to tell them. There was no central location where we have a link. If you asked our Johns Hopkins shared resource administrators, they're going to say, oh, there's websites. Oh, we have a website with everything. Okay, but no one knows it exists, which is another problem. So you have to kind of find a way to filter out all the noise. The Core in a Box website. If I go up to a grad student or a postdoc or even some senior PIs and go, have you heard of the Core in a Box website? They would go, what? So this is really on you, and this is kind of part of the problem. If there are any core administrators here and shared resource administrators, this is part of the problem. Talk to your people and figure it out. I'm kind of a really rare instance. I'm going to get off my soapbox in a minute, too, that I even have the experience to do this. And the way I got to supporting the core is kind of long and windy, but it was it turned out to be very fruitful. And I'm happy, and I'm so glad that I'm here and able to share that story. Anyways, domain names that are easy to remember. Social media is also something that you need to choose that is easy to remember. I think our ECGC Twitter, which I haven't done anything with, so sorry about that, is ECGC, and I think it's just that, JHMI, and make sure that's super important is that you have your branding available on that. So you want to have your logo. Also in your bio for Twitter, I think I'm supposed to call it X now, right? I think we say X. Okay, I'm never going to do it. It's probably not going to happen. X. You can have your bio, you can link to your website, which is key identifiers. So you want to think about when you're doing social media, what are our key identifiers that people can see and see that I'm real? One problem is with when we had the Center for Computational Genomics, a few years after we created this center, Hopkins dumped a lot of money into something called JHU Genomics. They wanted our domain name, they wanted our Twitter handle, they wanted all of this stuff, and my PI said, no, it's mine. Which I was like, that's ballsy, which is good. You know, I was very proud of her for doing that. But we got a lot of people tweeting us who did not mean to be tweeting us. And that was a bit of that was actually a huge challenge. So I don't know how to mitigate that, but I don't want people stealing my brand, but then having those identifiers can hopefully try to change that. However, in hindsight, I probably would have handed it over because I can't compete with like millions of dollars in an entire building when we are like a lab. So I would have just done something a little different, probably. Or I should have been ballsy like my PI. Now, when we create your website, there's noticed a lot of things. So I was talking about our flow core in the Cancer Center. He plastered so much on there. There's a question I'm going to ask a little bit later, and I'll tell you what his answer was to that question. But when first creating your website, I think it's really important to map out your content. So first thing is create a sitemap. On the next slide, I'll show you an example of what a sitemap looks like. The other tip for creating your website and creating it visual and making it easily digestible is to don't overload your homepage. Use images that tell a story. Spread out your menus and links. We moved away from the big, long drop-downs menus on websites. If you notice, a lot of modern websites don't have that. There's something called scrollers. So you want to spread out your menus and links. Think about how your website looks on a mobile device. This is huge. And actually, I'm on the board of my son's travel soccer league. I don't know why I did that. Another one, don't know why. But I went to look on the website. Registration was open for tryouts, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to pull it up on my phone. I didn't register. I posted that registrations are open, but I didn't actually register my kid, so I'm going to do it on my phone really quick, and I open it up, and I'm like, oh no, I couldn't see anything. It was just a giant image. So luckily, if you scroll, it kind of worked, but it looked horrible. So if you can imagine what pulling something up on your phone is, there are so many ways. We've all done it. We've all had this experience. We're like, that website looks like crap. Because the text is going to be really, really tiny, or the text is going to be huge, and it's going to be one letter per, right under it, and you can't even read it. So that's something that is super important. There are tools that you can use when building websites that I'm going to talk about in a bit that can help you see what it looks like on both presentations and make little changes in the code, which you won't code. They're very GUI. Websites where you can just point and click and make those changes so that you can make it look more dynamic and flexible between your sources or whatever's accessing your site. This is the example of a sitemap. This is literally your top menu bar, your home, what you're going to link to from home, and then all of these links underneath those boxes are going to be links that you're linking to on your website. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a drop-down list. Remember, we're moving away. So this is actually super link-heavy, but some of these links can be in your text. Some of these links can be call to action buttons. Some of them can be an image. But just if you're going to organize a site and there's things that you know that you want, it's best to map it out, figure out where you're going to put it, and then build. Then build your content, then put your site together. This is an example of what I was talking about. Someone who gave a presentation at an ABRF business skills workshop was very proud of a website that he redid, and I think it's actually a wonderful example, so I like to use it often. His microscopy, I can't ever say this, Joe, I'm gonna make you tell me how to say it again. Microscopy, there you go, did it. There's a microscopy core that he redid a website for. You can see the first one's kind of the old style HTML, where there's links everywhere. And I want to ask if anyone can tell what's wrong with that example of a website. What's wrong with that example of a homepage? That's part of it, yep. It is very busy. And what about that video? So if you think of a newspaper and you think of above the fold, you're going to have your headline story above the fold. Everything under the fold, that's like second best. So if you're looking above the fold, if you don't know what microscopy is, are you going to have any idea what that little video is? No, I don't. I don't even know what it is. I have no idea. And I use this in presentations because I have no idea what it is. So that's something that you have to think about. When you open up your website and you see that above the fold, before you get scrolling, you have to have something that's informative, tells me what it is, what I'm looking at, or else my eyes are going to get tired. The really expensive websites that you look at are like, oh, that's really nice. They have a skilled designer, but it's also someone who's been trained to understand eye movement. This is something when I was getting my master's degree, I learned a little bit about, not to the extent that people do, but there are programs that will watch a person look at a computer program or a website, and they track how much your eye moves. The more your eye has to move on a page, the lower score it gets. So if you have something that, which is why we have moved on to these scroller-style websites, because people don't mind scrolling. It's your eyes that get tired. So if you're looking and you're moving, having to move all around to figure out where to go, we're going to lose patience. We're very quick, demanding people these days. We want information quickly. We want it now. And if you have to move around and kind of navigate a site, you're just going to get frustrated. So you can kind of see the examples of how that's different. You can see the links just because they're all on the bottom of that, above the fold. We're missing some on the left. You can see all the topics on the right. And it's a much better visual representation. It's not using dead space. That image of a microscope is appropriate. And you can know where you can go quickly. It's also standing out a little bit more with the visualization of the words. So this is so important to remember. Audiences will only read 20% of a web page with 600 plus words. How many, I even think about this. I love reading, long form articles on the web. I think it's wonderful, but I also get kind of tired if I have to scroll and I'm like, oh my gosh, how long is this thing? Really, what are they talking about? And I love it, but I still get really tired. So if you're going to have something on your website, we want to make sure that we're getting our information in 600 words or less, ideally less. This is another thing that visual information is super important, and this is when you're writing your flyers, when you're making your flyers, writing your content, sending an email, realize that visual information gets to the brain 60,000 times faster than text. 90% of information transmitted to the brain is visual. That is why infographics are such a powerful thing, because you can tell a story and get information to someone faster. Kind of an example of this, a lot of people, we are competing with videos now, thank you TikTok and YouTube and Instagram. And so when we have something, people are like, I just want to watch a video, I don't want to read. People really don't want to read. I'm old, I'm not, but I am. I want to read, so I have to remind myself, no one else wants to read. They want to see something quick, they want to get the information, and you have to use visualization in the best way. And I think this is something when we're talking about visualizing our data in a way that makes sense. You can't cram everything in there to try to make it make sense. You're telling a story with your data, you're telling a story with your services and how you're getting your word out. It's very similar principles. This is an example of our Convergence Institute webpage. This is actually not our current website. This is one that we've been building in the back because I had to make our current website in 2 days. So it's okay, it's passable, but it wasn't what it should be. So this above the fold, I think, is much, much better. You can see our mission. Let's see, These are all links. These are our call to action buttons. This down here, call to action button. And you can see on this website and on this example of our homepage, it reduces eye movement. You don't have to move your eye much to know where to go. It's cleaner with less text density. And you're moving away really from the big drop-down menus. Even on our website that I made a year ago, we have too many drop-down menus, and I'm like, this is not good. Way too text-heavy, also not good. I was trying to really, talk about our research and how we're developing technologies. And And that was actually a huge problem because all of my information got lost in my text. Yeah, so that's the last part is when you think, instead of having your drop-down list, your links should live on your web page. So you can see here, this isn't a real drop-down list. Not up here like we would normally think. We do have some links on our homepage up top. I think it's cutting off. On the big screen, it's cutting off, but we do have home, mission, education, with a few drop-downs, events, and giving. But the main ones that I want you to focus on, the main things that tell you what the Convergence Institute is, are going to be right here. The other things are events, and the other things I really want you to know about, something new that's coming up, are going to be here. Again, above the fold. Messaging. So now that we have our web presence figured out, we're going to think about messaging. This is an example of a few years ago that I did for our core, ECGC, when we were announcing single cell services back when that was new. This example on the left is an email, and this is the flyer that I sent out with it. There are a few things that I did wrong here and a few things that I did good. I did well. There's some visual hierarchy in our messaging, so we know what the call is, and I have a link. So that's telling you how to visit and schedule a consult meeting. The text is short, which is good to go in an email blast. There's a small chance people might actually read it, especially if it's a topic that's important. This flyer went out with the email, so a lot of department admins will print it out, put it on their admin bulletin boards, and that was actually pretty useful. And I think everyone's looking at that and going, okay, I know what that image is. If you know what single cell is, you know what that is, you can identify it. It's a good use of visualization. I made this flyer with a template in Adobe. One thing is I know about communications, but I don't know about design. I can critique a design and say why I don't like it. I can say this space isn't good. I'm not looking, this is really visually overwhelming. I want something that's much more simple, at least to the point. So this checks off those marks. But there's something that I think is very important, at least in modern technology. We're going to be seeing it everywhere. Here we've seen, but we don't have a QR code. And I think I should have asked, that should have been a good question, what's missing, because I saw you knew. I don't have a QR code, which is a huge mistake, because yeah, you can type in the website and that's easy, but I could have made a QR code that goes right to our homepage. You can schedule a consult meeting with our directors, and it would have been instant, a lot faster. People don't have patience to go and, I mean, I do, but type in a website. So this would have been a great way for me to include that QR code. Now on this flyer, we did. This is for our upcoming Convergence Institute Symposium. It'll be on May 29th. Looks like it's going to be pretty exciting. If you notice here, I made sure that that QR code is huge. It is prominent. You know where to go. That's going to lead you directly to our website. On our website, we are going to have 2 call to action buttons, one to submit a poster, one to register for the event. It'll also have our speakers. It'll be presented, they're presented pretty similarly on our website. But I think this is a really good example of a flyer, not just because I actually didn't even make it, my assistant did. But I think there's some really good elements here that corrects the previous example. Now we're going to talk kind of like about the contents of a flyer. I'm going to be talking next about creating visual hierarchy and what that means. And I think this is a foreign concept to a lot of people. I'm finding this more and more as I'm teaching and getting people to understand marketing and how to present information, that creating visual hierarchy doesn't come naturally. It does have to be taught, it does have to be learned. One of the things that we have to do is, what is the first and most important thing that I want to do? So you're going to see these pictures of people. That's important because we want to know who the speakers are. Why would I want to go to this event? But then you also have to go, what are they for? Where are they going? What are they going to be? What is this thing? So that's why we make sure that we have, again, above the fold, if you follow moving down, eye movement, it's going to be up top. And then we get to the buy-in with the interest, and then we're going to, oops, I think I have that. That's the meat, what I like to call the meat if we're making a sandwich. Remember our stories in elementary school, we made a sandwich. And then there's our call to action. Now, I stole this slide off of Canva because I think it was just such a really good way to show good visual hierarchy and not so good visual hierarchy. And I'm really going to hammer home as I'm going to let you guys kind of go off on Canva and do your own thing. And then I'll be here to help and answer questions. The next 3 slides are explaining visual hierarchy from Canva. You can see that this creates a lot of space. You can have an image that helps tell your story. Again, the use of visualization. You're not going to be an expert on this. I literally took an entire class in my undergrad or my grad student about visualization and how to use images. An entire semester, 16 weeks on how to use images. This is not something that comes naturally, so don't think you have to be perfect. But you can see that when we use a resource like Canva or something else that really helps us figure out templates, they have kind of already established a hierarchy for us. We can see here how it would be where to go for the information, and over there it gets a little busy. Again, balance is also super important. If you want your flyer or any design to deliver results, you need to keep things balanced, well-spaced, and uncrowded. I think a lot of times, especially when we go back to our old journalism days, like when I was in high school, I was editor of the yearbook and the newspaper. We always talked about white space and how white space is bad. You don't want to have too much white space because, at that time, print is valuable. It costs money. Ink and paper are expensive. We kind of have a lot of luxury now. And when we're doing advertisements, we can use white space to our advantage. We can take note of what that white space can tell us where to focus, where to look and where not to look. Because it's dead space, we don't need to look there. And then when you balance every element where you have graphics and text, that also kind of helps your eye adjust your information, adjust and absorb information. And then you have to assess the relevance of your information. This is, again, that sandwich idea, the 1, 2, 3. What's the most important? The name of your event, the name of your service, what you want someone to know. And then is kind of the meat. How do they get there? What's going on? This new service does this. Why is it important? And then the third is your call to action, which you can kind of probably have interchanged with 2 or 3. Not in hierarchy, but in size. Okay, now this is the fun part, is when I get to tell you what tools you can do to actually do this. So you can use all of these things. If you notice these logos, Canva is the one that I think is really, really user-friendly. WordPress is where my website is held. We use a plugin on WordPress called Elementor. That's actually a really easy way to make a website in a few days. Again, we have Adobe Creative Cloud. I have a little bit more experience in InDesign than I do in Canva, so if you have questions in a bit, bear with me. But again, I like Canva for a lot of reasons. PicMonkey is another one. MailChimp is a great resource to create HTML emails that can kind of help you instead of having a text-heavy email, you can do an HTML email. PictoChart is also one, and Wix. Wix is what I use for our travel soccer league. That's actually a really nice resource. It does very similar things to WordPress. However, I think it is even more user-friendly than WordPress. Wix really is truly point and click. You can click and drag things, put it in, edit right there, and type right there. It's kind of wild how easy it is to use. And price point, I think, is very reasonable if you have to pay. Fortunately for us at Hopkins, we do have a Hopkins WordPress account, so I can use WordPress and Hopkins will pay for it. They also provided some branding for us, like templates that we can use, which is very helpful. However, I actually can't use those because they aren't really relevant to us. So being the core from the Cancer Center, I was not allowed to get a WordPress Hopkins website. I had to go through the School of Medicine. I don't know if you've ever gone on the University School of Medicine website. It's the prime example of overwhelming and unnavigable. So if you know where to go, you're great, but if you don't, you're not. So that was a bit of a bummer, and you have to kind of find ways to make up for that. And I did by our ECGC is a core housed within a division. So on our division webpage, I made sure to have a webpage that's just a one-page scroller with all of our information about our core, which was surprising I could do it in one page, but you can. You can with links, you can with visual hierarchy, you can do it. And this is the fun part. It's your turn. So if you want to go and create a Canva account now, I can help you I wanted to make sure that everybody had time for questions, so I rushed through the beginning part. But you can create a Canva account, make your plan for a message that you want to send out, and I can be here to give you feedback. We can use it as examples for other people to learn from you and your example. If you have something ready to go, we can talk about it. And remember, in your planning stages, these are the things you need to think of. Who is your target audience? What do you want your audience to do? How will your flyer be viewed or distributed? And design. Do not get overwhelmed with the design. The reason I like Canva is because they take that design thinking out of you don't have to worry about it, which I think is something that is super important. If we're starting from scratch, we get really overwhelmed, thinking, oh, the design has to be a certain way, it has to look good, I want it to look professional. Canva does it all for you. The nice thing about those templates that you can find, there's a lot free. You can have a free account. There's no need to pay for it. And you can if you want to, but there's so many things that you can get for free on that website. There's absolutely no need. You can create social media tiles. You can create edit some images. Now, if you want to do edit manipulation, obviously Photoshop's better, but you can do some things on Canva. And they take all of the template and the stress of trying to figure out a visual hierarchy and where to go out. Because it's going to be a living example, and you just plug your information in. And that's why I really like it, and I think it's a good resource for everyone here to use if you need it. Okay, and then if you want to log in, you can. If not, we can just ask questions. Again, just an example, this Convergence Institute logo is one that I did make with a graphic designer. I did not make that. We also had someone in a lab. Our lab kind of had a competition to see who would win the ECGC logo. So we let a lot of our creative lab grad students make the logo for ECGC, and that one won. And then there's our official Hopkins Cancer Center logo with the dome. So I just wanted to give an example to represent me and what we do, but also how we went 3 different ways about getting those logos. And if you want to find me, I'm on LinkedIn, or you can email me, and I'm also here to answer any questions. Justine. I can hear you. I can repeat your question. It's okay.
So, speak louder. It's a great presentation. Thank you so much. A lot of us here are like single person cores, or we are space sorting.
Yeah.
Marketing is like the last thing on our mind, and it is important. Your book is very privileged. So how did you?
They are.
For them, but what advice would you give to say a single core person or a resource constrained core that may not have these great resources that you share with us?
I think that's a really good question, and actually something that I'm going to get back on my soapbox again. But you can do this. You can take 15 minutes a day and make a flyer. Next week, when you know you have something coming up, you could when you know the principles, when you know the elements, you know how to create a message, you understand visual hierarchy, you understand calls to action, and you have the tools, which is why I think, nope, there we go. I think when you have the tools, I think that is probably one of the most important things that really empowers you and enables you to do that. That's why if I would have had my little laptop up here, I would have given you a little Canva tutorial and shown you how you can find something super easy to do and make a flyer in 5 minutes. That's really all it takes is 5 minutes. So you do have time for this. It stinks and it's overwhelming, but it's not scary and it shouldn't be a barrier. Yep.
So if you're communicating with your branding folks, sort of branding police or folks on campus, it can be a real problem. And when you hear you're not allowed to brand, you're not allowed to have a logo or something like that, I would encourage you, this is what I did was turn around and say, oh, it's not a logo, it's not a brand, it's a consistent look across. And you can do things, we can't put together a logo for the flow cytometry core, for example, but you could put a picture of different images of flow cytometry core images across the top of your flyer. That's not really a logo, and you can use that over and over and over again.
And if you have anything with your title of your name,
Yeah.
of the title of your core, make sure it's always the same font, the same weight, the same colors, and that's kind of a logo without a logo.
Exactly. So don't get discouraged if you get pushback. Think creatively about how to meet their objectives or their criteria, but also how to differentiate each group or your program. It can be done. So that's, I would encourage everybody not to stop there and not get discouraged.
Thank you, that's great. Another thing about Canva, I think I was talking to some colleagues yesterday about making one-pagers for your core. Canva has some really great templates for something like a one-pager. It's usually a marketing handout or a marketing flyer, but they have some really wonderful templates that are pre-built with that visual hierarchy. You can just use them to plug your information in. Or if you wanted to make a report, I think for the Convergence Institute, we have something where we do hand out to funders, to potential funders, just kind of giving you a recap. It's like a 3-page. I use InDesign for that, but Canva does have a free template that you can use to do something similar.
One of my questions would be, for vendors who are offering marketing, especially if you're trying to get users to use their equipment, do you have any advice on how to get them to be more effective at their marketing, to target new users within your institution or outside of that?
That's a really good question about working with vendors. Our strongest relationship, or my strongest relationship with vendors, was probably with our Illumina reps, who lead as many people as they can to our core. And I think that's, just be frank. I think a lot of marketing people are very frank. I'm a very blunt person, I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm not alone. So if you could just, I would start that conversation with them and see what they can do. But thankfully our Illumina people will refer to us. They tend to know which core at our School of Medicine is going to be the best for them, because they know what we're using in our, what the turnover rate are, what reagents we're buying. They know what perhaps we're doing, and they can really help guide the PIs that reach out to them about how to lead back to us. So I would think develop that relationship with them and just be open and talk about it. Yeah, you're welcome. That's a good question.
Hi, very nice talk. My name is Joshua Strauss. I work at UNC. I run a multi-user core. I have a Twitter account I had before starting the core. I use it mostly for like fact-finding information and a little mostly for work. But like I'm a fun person, so sometimes I put fun stuff in it. I'm debating if I should set up more of a Twitter account or an Instagram account more specific to the core. I've seen people do this. Could you talk a little bit about those two options, or maybe how people are integrating social media into their core, specifically to people who maybe don't really like using social media and are not sure how to best integrate it into like the housekeeping things for core?
Yeah, and that's, I think, it's kind of funny because I'm preaching about social media, but I always had a huge, like that, that's a real struggle. And I think it's easiest to do when you have an event coming up. One thing, with social media is they always tell us that to have constant content, but you can't just, actually, again, I'm going to bring up travel soccer. I got into a fight with a dad because he wanted to just have like here's your athlete, and pick one kid from each team every week. And I'm like, oh my gosh, but what did they do? Why are we highlighting this child? It's weird and creepy. I don't want to do that. I will highlight a team. I will talk about what this team did that's great. I'll talk about our program. I'll talk about building skills. But it's kind of weird and self-promoting at times, and it's uncomfortable. I think one thing that cores can do is promote events, and that we have a genomics events weekly, and that we post a link to the HTML document. We create that. I think my assistant actually does use Canva to post that, to create that HTML document, but Hopkins also has a listserv. They blocked out MailChimp. We can't use MailChimp, but thankfully they created their own, so we can use that. We can use that to create HTML. You can also use MailChimp, take the HTML code, and then put it into our Hopkins listserv. So that's, yeah. But for social media, we use that as that's kind of our repeat, consistent content. And then we kind of throw it in here and there when something comes up. Someone published a paper. Doing publication searches, I found, is something that we have to do consistently once a month. If there's something really great that gets into one of the big ones, Nature, Science, Cell, we will tweet that after asking the PIs for their permission. And just look like, hey, we generated this data. Kind of gives ourselves a pat on the back, but also creating content that way. I very often do that. My personal Twitter, my personal X account is to stalk celebrities and news and information gathering. So I tend to not post. However, my PI, Ilana Fertig, is very involved in Twitter. She was just one of the 12 people selected to live tweet AACR. And I do a lot of writing for her, and I think that's actually a lot easier because I don't have to do it. But that's a good question. It is a struggle. And then you just kind of have to build up something feasible for you to do, and don't put too much pressure on yourself to create that content. Yeah.
My university has this big subscription to all the Microsoft apps and things.
Yeah.
Some others have like Google and Adobe. Are there any tools in those suites that you recommend for building flyers or HTML email settings?
That's a really good question. I'm a Mac user who was also forced to adapt to Microsoft because of my institution, and I hated it. So I can't actually say that I know of any, which is horrible. However, I'm sure there are some. Back in my high school days, which was a really long time ago, I'm not going to say how long, we had, I think, Publisher, was that it? That's gone now. So I think one of the things we use the most Microsoft-wise for creating a flyer would be PowerPoint. That's what I've seen a lot of people use. You can get free templates for that, which I think they can do. I've seen people make HTML websites or documents in Word. I have no idea how they did that. I don't know. So I should, but I don't. I will say that Microsoft does have a very good useful tool for scheduling things like consult meetings, or if you have like a data board that needs to come in and ask you a experimental design questions, they'll have something called Booking. Hopefully a lot of people here know Booking. That's actually really great. They give you a little link that you can embed onto your website and create that little call to action. It's very easy to do. You can put it in your email signature as well. But I don't know, that's worth exploring. I'm gonna have to look into it. That's a good question. Thank you.
I mostly wonder about websites, because I have a website, but if I go to search for my core, it's buried on the second or third page. And the only people who find me are the ones that tell me that they can help with search engine optimization.
Oh, geez.
So how important is that? Like, what should we be thinking about so we can actually show up in the search?
That's another really good question because they changed it. We don't use meta tags anymore. Google got away with meta tags because people were kind of working the system. It's actually really kind of hard. I'm not an SEO expert by any means. This is something I need to learn. I kind of put my assistant on it. It was like, hey, while I'm at this conference, you need to take every single class that you can find on LinkedIn Learning or whatever, because we need to figure this out. Our quantitative science division website, if I look up quantitative sciences, you can find my website. If you put in data science, you cannot. It's not even anywhere. I don't even know if it's going to be on page 3. A lot of the Google algorithms now go on links. So if you have faculty profiles, make sure that you link to it. And there's some SEO plugins that you can use on things like WordPress. But I found those websites to be heavily, or at least some of the things that I've been reading, the plugins are heavily jargon and I can't break it down. I was actually scared someone was going to ask me about it. So, no, it's okay. But another thing about that, if you have a web page and it takes a really long time to find your core, we need to put that more up and center. For an example of that is our quantitative science website. We do have a whole section on our homepage that links you directly to our cores. We have 3 cores within our quantitative sciences division. we want to make sure that you find them because they are a pretty important part of our faculty's lives. And we want to make sure people know that and know where to find the info. So edit the website.
Thanks again. You mentioned newsletters very briefly.
Yes.
Do you have like tips and tricks for newsletters? Do you like newsletters?
I like newsletters. I think they're great. I think the burden is on creating the content for them. And I think as a core, I think it can be a huge challenge to make the content unless you have someone like me who's dedicated. But even when I say someone like me who's dedicated to making content, I have about 10 different hats. And in between writing a grant for this and creating content for that and you know, doing some other writing that I have to do, and plus all the other communications things, I don't necessarily have time to make a newsletter. So if you can find something that's kind of self-sustaining, I know of a lot of people they've farmed out their writing, so they'll have like a PI, they have a frequent user, they'll have a grad student write about something, and then you can just, if you create a template and then do it that way, that would probably be the easiest. I do like newsletters. I don't think they should, I do it like quarterly. Yeah. And make it viewable on the web. Yep, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, just to add to the social media thing. So content creation is really, really tough, and it's going to be really hard. But for a core, I feel like if you have like a hashtag that runs along with you guys, that's fantastic. And actually, there are content out there. Literally, like there are like flow posters. I'm from a core. Like, I used to be with a core. So like you have like contents that's available. You could actually do like a repost with your hashtag, and that will actually have like a sustaining things for you. Like if you just search for that hashtag, you'll be able to pull up all those things. So that's something that you can utilize, and you don't have to worry about like making contents every day.
That's a really good point. I do that all the time.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, in my head, I call it farming. Like I'm farming for content. And if you look those hashtags, if you look at what your home institution's doing, a lot of times they will feature one of your users. You can retweet that. That's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up.
And the hashtags are always going to be with you, and you could say archive those things for you. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
No, it's a wonderful point.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm currently working on updating our core's website, actually, so this is actually really great.
Okay.
But I was wondering if you had any information on when you have an outdated website builder that kind of doesn't allow for full creativity. Any
What are you using?
It's called Barista. I'm not really sure who makes it.
Never heard of that one.
It's extremely outdated.
Okay.
It's been a struggle. But just any advice on kind of maximizing those limitations and creativity.
Yeah, so I don't think you have to worry too much about being creative. Really just focus on that, creating that visual hierarchy, because no matter what, it doesn't matter. I used to make websites literally from scratch. I'd code my own HTML, I'd code my own content style sheet. I don't recommend doing that. But if you have an outdated website, you can still kind of mimic some of these design elements that you like and kind of do that. Another thing that I do before I make a website is I literally take a piece of paper, I'll have my sitemap, and then I will draw out a homepage. So that might be a good way to start versus trying to figure out, oh, I got this super clunky thing, I don't even know what I'm doing, I don't know what I'm looking at. First, start out by looking outside of the box, draw it on a piece of paper what you would like to do, and then see how you can use that program to make it work. Hopefully that's helpful.
No, it is. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anyone else? I kind of rushed really fast, and I really wanted to do like an actual Canva demonstration, but I don't have my laptop up here and I can't plug it in. So that's kind of a bit of a bummer. But hopefully you can play around with Canva on your own time. Maybe tonight, if you can't fall asleep, you're like, oh, I'm going to do that. It will literally take you 5 minutes, and you'll have something that looks good. Okay. Thank you.